Hello everyone, welcome to this video review session. In this review session I'm gonna go over some topics that students requested me to explain again. It's not a comprehensive review session, rather you should treat it as my responses to students' queries. If you have more queries after this video lecture, please feel free to get in touch with me. Okay, let's get the ball rolling then. The first topic that I want to go over is current account. A current account deficit is a measure of foreign indebtedness. We have talked about it in the class. We discussed why a current account deficit implies foreign indebtedness. We'll just go over that quickly one more time. Let's take a look at this overly simplified example here, where we have a US firm and a German firm. So this US firm exports goods to this German firm worth $200, and the German firm then exports goods worth $300 to the US firm. So US firm on one hand is exporting goods to a German firm worth $200. On the other hand, this US firm is importing goods from this German firm worth $300. And from here we can calculate the current account deficit for US, which is just the difference between exports and imports. So it's just $200, which is the value of US exports. We subtract from that the value of US imports, which is $300. The difference between this is negative $100. It's a negative number because it's a current account deficit for United States, given that there are no other trades between US or any other country. So again, it's a very simplified example. Or equivalently, we can just say the German current account surplus is $100. Now, so the German firm now has this $100. So the German firm may decide to use this $100 to buy a US corporate or government bond, or it could also decide to convert that into euro, but will not really go that far. We'll just stick to this simplified case where this German firm decides to hold this $100 and wants to use this $100 to buy a US government bond or a US corporate bond. So essentially, the German firm is lending $100 to US when it is buying a US bond. Okay, so you can see how the difference between exports and US exports and US imports actually translates into a lending from the German firm to the United States. Therefore, this $100, this current account deficit, it measures the foreign indebtedness of the United States, how much the United States actually owe to foreign country. Here, the United States owes to Germany $100 because this German firm invested $100 in the US bonds. Okay, next we'll take a look at a few problems which are associated with a large current account deficit. Pay attention to the word large here. If the current account deficit is small, then it doesn't really matter much. But problems start arising if we have a large current account deficit or persistently large current account deficit. So current account deficit implies probably the country which is suffering from a current account deficit is indulging in excessive consumption. That is, it is consuming more than what it should be consuming in an ideal case. That's one problem, so it's overconsumption. The second problem is that, as we have already seen, a current account deficit means foreign indebtedness. If we have a large current account deficit, then that implies a high foreign indebtedness, a high level of foreign indebtedness. Now, a high level of foreign indebtedness itself is not really a problem as long as you can pay back, as long as you can pay the amount that you borrowed from the foreigners. But it becomes a problem when you fail to return, or you fail to pay back the loan, you fail to pay back the debt. That's when it becomes a problem. And when the size of foreign indebtedness becomes huge, then the problem can actually become worse because you have to pay back a high level of debt. Now, oftentimes we borrow this money from foreign investors to invest in domestic projects, but if these domestic projects turn out to be unproductive projects, then will be in then because of these failed projects, it will be difficult for us to pay back the debt, and that will lead to what we call a sudden stop. A sudden stop basically involves two things. First of all, lending from foreign countries will just decline when the foreign countries find that you can't pay them back, you can't pay the debt back, then they'll just stop lending you money. The second thing, which falls under sudden stop, is the foreign countries, they may demand immediate payment of the previous loans that they made. So these are the two problems with a large current account deficit. Now we'll take a look at some problems associated with a large current account surplus. Now, a large current account surplus itself is not really a bad thing, but it becomes bad when we have a very large current account surplus. We have a current account surplus when exports are greater than imports. So when you're exporting more than you're importing, this probably indicates that you are consuming, the country which is experiencing large current account surplus is probably consuming less. Probably their consumption of goods and services is less than the optimal domestic consumption, because they're just exporting too much, they're not importing too many goods, that is, they're consuming less. The second problem is that if you have a high current account surplus, that means you are lending too much money to foreign countries. Remember, a current account deficit means foreign indebtedness. The flip side of that is a current account surplus, which is associated with foreign lending. So you are actually essentially you are lending money to foreign countries. So when you have a large current account surplus, it essentially means that you're lending a lot of money to foreign countries. Now, when you're lending a lot of money to foreign countries, you are giving up the opportunity of investing in domestic projects. So your domestic investment is probably less than optimal. And if you have a less than optimal domestic investment, then you'll experience domestic unemployment as well. Now, the problem with current account surplus is that when you're lending a large amount to foreign countries, then there is always a possibility of facing difficulty in the future in recovering loans from foreign countries. Okay, the next topic that I want to talk about is twin deficit. There was a homework in the written assignment. There was a question in the written assignment which involved this topic, twin deficit. So it is defined as a simultaneous occurrence of a current account deficit and the government budget deficit, which is also known as a fiscal deficit. So we know from national income account that total savings, which is the summation of private savings, SP, and public savings, SG, is equal to investment plus current account balance. So this is something that I showed in the class, how I showed you the derivation of this equation here. This SG here, the government saving, is equal to the difference between the tax that the government raises and the government expenditure. So what we're going to do here is in the next step, we're going to replace this SG with T minus G. So in the next step, we have SP just as before. We add to that T minus G, that we just replaced SG with T minus G, and the right hand side remains the same as it was before here. We do a little more rearrangement in the next step. We bring the investment component to the left side, so we have private savings minus investment plus budget deficit here, T minus G. If T minus G is negative, then basically we have a deficit, but if T minus G is greater than 0, we say we have a government budget surplus. Anyway, so we have private savings minus investment plus government debt or government deficit is equal to current account balance. Now we have a twin deficit when both T minus G and CA, both of them are negative. That is, your government expenditure is greater than the amount of taxes that the government is raising, and at the same time you are importing more than you are exporting. So there seems to be a connection between government budget deficit and a current account. Now, in the homework question, we were asked if reducing the fiscal spending, that is, if reducing the government spending can help us reduce the current account deficit. To answer that question, let's take a look at this equation one more time. So if G goes down, that is, if fiscal spending is cut, if G is reduced, then what essentially happens is more money suddenly opens up for private investment. Private firms who were looking for money previously to invest, they suddenly have an increase in supply of funds because government has decided not to invest. So the amount of money that previously government wanted to use is suddenly opened up to private investment, to private firms for private investment purpose. Therefore, a reduction in government expenditure may lead to an offsetting increase in investment, because suppose that the government wanted to invest $500, but the government has cut down its spending by $500. These $500 are now available to private firms who can now invest these in their own firms. So essentially, if G goes down by $500, investment is going to go up by $500, and they will cancel each other off. They will cancel each other out, and as a result, there is not the left-hand side will just remain the same as the right-hand side. So there's not going to be any effect. There's not going to be any effect of a fiscal cut or fiscal spending cut on current account deficit. So to answer the question, a cut in fiscal spending does not guarantee a reduction in the scale of current account deficit, because even if we cut down government spending, it's quite possible that private investment will rise by the same amount. It's possible theoretically that it will rise by the same amount, private investment. As a result, it will offset the initial reduction in government spending. Consequently, the current account deficit will just remain at the same level as before.